Take up a bunch of your time with
That's all right.
little anecdotes that I come up with, but back in 1998, I went to a children's swimming party with my own kids. They were little then, and it came to my attention that there was a cancer doctor there, an oncologist. So I chatted him up a little bit. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to talk at all, but I talked to him anyway. Got him to talk. And what really locked him is when I said, do viruses feature in a person developing cancer? And he looked at me with a strange look and he said, we're investigating that possibility. So let me just ask you, how long has it been known that viruses are a serious component in the development of cancer in a human being?
At least 100 years. So since respiratory syncytial viruses and others, since other retroviruses in mice and men. So the whole theory of oncogenes is that we used to call them retrotransposons or jumping genes, transposable elements from other things. So at least 100 years it's been known that viruses drive cancer. And that's for 40 years. That's my entire work. How do viruses cause and contribute to driving cancer development and progression? And we just ignored it the entire time.
Why would this guy vapor lock like that? I couldn't have offended him that much. I mean, it was friendly enough. He just wasn't a very talkative individual. He's a quiet guy, but the way that he said it, he made it sound like it was some sort of really protected information that he didn't even really want to get into at all. Like, I can't believe you asked me that question. That's what I read on it. Maybe he just didn't like me, but I mean, that's possible, I suppose. It seemed to get his attention.
It's not like you, and it wasn't me when I was arrested, but this is just it. For anyone to have the courage to stand up and say, wait a minute, you just cause contagious viruses that cause contagious cancer. And that was chapter 8 of our first book, Plague. It just said, oh my God, at the end of the July 22nd confidential secret meeting, July 22nd, 2009 at NIH, everybody was looking at the data from prostate cancer to childhood cancer to myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome. Wait a minute, we have contagious disease from viruses that have been in our blood supply for 30 years and are contaminants of the vaccines we've been mandating and that we've been developing since 1934. 1934 was the first evidence of oh, wait a minute, the polio vaccines picked up these little mouse viruses that don't do anything to the mouse, but when you inject them in children, they can wreak all kinds of havoc, including autism, ME/CFS, and cancer. And that was buried in 1934. That's chapter 5 of our first book, Plague. And it was buried in 1934. And it looks like John D. Rockefeller Institute, and this is what my co-author, Ken Lively, goes into in great detail because he's the attorney and he went to the Los Angeles courthouse. We actually both did, and we dug up the records and you can see how it's buried and how a fund was put together to pay off to the tune of today or then in 2011 what would have been $6 million for every one of the victims, the doctors, the nurses, the family members who were infected.
Did you hear that? I'm going to back it up.
Into in great detail because he's the attorney and he went to the Los Angeles courthouse. We actually both did, and we dug up the records and you can see how it's buried and how a fund was put together to pay off to the tune of today or then in 2011 what would have been $6 million for every one of the victims, the doctors, the nurses, the family members who were infected by injection and their lives, and injured severely by these vaccines. But the part of the deal was shut your mouth, don't tell anybody, and you get your $6 million. Well, this was part of the offer as I was arrested, as you mentioned, without bail, without a legal warrant, without a legal anything, nothing, just taken from my home and held in jail. And yeah, basically tortured for 5 days, and my husband tortured, trying to get me to relent and sign the same deal they signed in 1934. We'll let you go. We'll pay you a couple $1,000,000. You'll get your life back. You might even get a Lasker Award or a Nobel Prize. We'll let you back into science as long as you never say another word about it. And of course, I'd never take that deal, and that's the opening of Pandemic Indoctrination Part 2, with me talking with Nikki Willis, and what I said, if one child, if one grandma, and the reason I said grandma is because, my mother and my sisters and brothers' grandmother, was killed by a Prevnar and flu shot given to her in 2012, as she was bullied into it like millions of Americans. And she couldn't ask me because I was discredited and had just gotten out of jail, and she didn't want to bother me. That shot sent her into 6 years of hell and killed her. And ultimately on January 22nd of 2019, horrific, as they drove a cancer that wasn't a cancer. And as you saw from early on in pandemic indoctrination, the third leading cause of death in this country is called iatrogenic. It means doctor or drug error. So they're killing our family, and that's what they're doing in COVID-19.